Hey everybody, uh, John here. Sorry I couldn't be there for the last class, but I would like to share my highlights of my ILPs through some video here. Um, Maybe I'm the one who goes first. I don't know. So I guess just before that, um, as we're wrapping up the course and getting into these ILPs, it gives obviously all of us an opportunity to kind of reflect on everything that's been learned and tie it into these lessons. And I'm sure for everybody, like the lesson planning process of like making detailed lesson plans like this and tossing in all the fine details, all of the expectations, the connections, the accommodations, modifications. It's a lot, and in our daily practice, um, it's realistically something that we do, but not in this form. But it is kind of cool to do in this form because it certainly holds you accountable, and it makes sure you're checking all the boxes. So yeah, on that note, I guess the key themes that kind of drove my ILPs, that session that we had with Catherine Fraser was just, I think, all for all of us, like incredible. Such a great session. Gave us so much like practical tips, tricks, tools, resources that I'm sure all of us have started using immediately the next day, probably. So the thing that stuck out with me the most from that I factored in these ILPs was just like music as sounds. I love the idea that she stopped using the word music and she's just talking about sounds and the creative process and exploring sounds. Um, my ILP focus was for primary grades. Originally, I was starting with grade one, but then I kind of cater it to grade one, two, and three, because as music teachers, we often hop around the grade levels. So basically, it was trying to take that, what Catherine taught us about that creative process, and create more play-based, inquiry-based lessons because through that, like the music theory comes. That was my focus, was to incorporate play-based learning and inquiry-based learning to teach music theory. So, which I think is so important because music, as we all know, is something where if it's easy just to drop out of. Obviously, students in primary grades they have to be in the music class, but if we can get if we can inspire them and make it fun and engaging and have them drive their own learning, making it student driven, that's where the magic happens, and that's hopefully where we get lifelong music learners, which I think for all of us is the ultimate goal. So yeah, so on that note, I guess um, my first lesson um, basically took an activity that we had done. I think it was in maybe the second online session of the empty repeating canvas. That's the one where basically you have your canvas, so your bar, and basically each student is coming up with a sound or a rhythm using some or percussion instruments to take place of like one of the beats in that bar. So I kind of looked at that activity and I thought it was great right from the start. It's like a nice, great activity that can be differentiated. Like students that are kind of are getting kind of like higher level out of it can do like more complex rhythms for each beat of the measure, or some can just do one rhythm for one beat. And you can start to like think about how can you make it more musical. So I really like that aspect. What I tried to do with this lesson, though, to kind of like bring it the next step, is to try to make it more culturally reflective. So that lesson for my ILP started out with students ahead of time could think of a sound or even bring in an instrument that relates to them. So some sounds might be something from their home. Might be something if they live in an urban environment. Might be something that they like hear outside on the street, or maybe something like a bell that's significant to them. So yeah, so basically it's the empty repeated canvas game, but to kind of take it to that level where it's like the students are kind of driving some of their own learning. They're the ones creating sounds that are meaningful to them. Through that, definitely, so like animals, weather, the weather, voices, things like this. And yeah, that's about it for that one. That's kind of like the highlights for that lesson, where students are encouraged to bring sounds from their own lives into that activity, and then we can kind of like as a teacher create like those prompting questions to build more on just like how can you make it more musical, or how can you blend the sounds together. So by asking some questions like how do the sounds connect to words, or what did you learn about someone else's sounds, things like that. So yeah, that was kind of my first lesson. My second one here involved kind of like the themes that we had about land-based education. And then we did a lot about with soundscapes, which is incredible, like in terms of the creative process. So for that one, basically, long story short, this ILP involved students creating a soundscape, each other. And my hook for that was to read The Water Princess. I'm sure we've all like read or have experience with that book, about the main character Georgie. She's in Africa, and she's going on the journey to collect water, because it's a very scarce resource there, to get clean drinking water. And the story's just so